Afternoon and Assalamualaikum from Kuala Lumpur, everybody. Again, joining with me, my name is Sherbiny from Nama Foundation. I wish every one of you all around the world are well and protected. In today's session, our main topic is going to be sustainable education. And we have two prominent speakers with a lot of experience and knowledge under their belt. We're going to be talking about two topics, subtopic from the main topic, which will be how could university achieve financial sustainability while struggling with imposed crisis. As we all know, there's a lot of crises stemming from COVID, and it branches into a lot of other challenges as well. So we're going to be talking about universities achieving financial sustainability with Professor Al-Sherbiny. Then we're going to be having the second topic led by Mr. Menon on the rise of private sector of higher education in Malaysia. Before that, allow me to introduce our first speaker. Both of them are very prominent. There's a lot of experience and achievements, but I'm going to be picking one or two points so that it gives you an idea about their experiences. Let's begin with Professor Al-Sherbiny. He, in terms of academic-wise, he has a PhD on infectious disease and vaccine development. I would say a science person like me, and also he has a professorship in immunology back in 2004, and ever since then he started to venture into more advisory role, whereby he had become an assistant minister in scientific research and higher education. He became a Secretary General of Supreme Council Research Institute and AJ, and currently he is the Senior Higher Education Advisor in Delegate International, which he supervised the affairs of 4 universities in Africa. Okay, so a lot of his achievement has been currently his achievement has been actively in reforming science and technology system in Egypt. So he's very science person like me, and also is I'm yet to become an advisor. Well, let's hope for that, inshallah. So he's going to be talking about how universities could achieve financial sustainability while struggling with imposed crisis. Without further ado, over to you, Professor Majid.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. It's late in Malaysia now. So I would like to start my presentation right away. So let me share the file. There you go. Okay. Well, I mean, as we mentioned that today we will talk about how we in universities, especially in Africa, are able to achieve financial sustainability while we are hammered with a lot of problems and challenges, especially with COVID-19 now. So to do so, it's important to understand first, excuse me. Why did that happen?
Yeah, it's accidentally being hidden. Yep, we can see it now. Okay.
Sustainability, as everybody knows, is that the concept before was only related to environment and related to ecological issues and social issues. But now, with being expanded into different arenas, and you can see here the sustainability concept applies to everything, and education is one of the prominent concepts of sustainability, of course. If we go for universities are a very paramount importance in our system, because they are requiring a lot of social demand on it, and they are the powerhouse. They are we seek the knowledge economy, and they provide support in terms of education, research, and also outreach for the community. Then we need to know that in the university is what we call here core. The core is the sustainability has to be integrated into the business of the university itself. So related to operation, related to research, related to all the aspects which are there. So and this has to be spanning over the social and economic and environmental concerns. Not only that, but we have to make sure that the sustainability concept is within the academic offering we are doing. And to be able to have sustainability in the university, you need to, most importantly, is to rationalize and reduce your cost in a way that become very cost effective. And that's really the concept we are working on, try to achieve sustainability in the universities. Usually in every university, or most of the universities who consider sustainability well, is that they establish an office which is related to sustainability. Some of the universities even have a vice rector or a vice provost for the issue of environment and the issue of the community, and they handle this kind of issues like sustainability. There is a mechanism how we can make tracking and look at the assessment of sustainability in the university. Is called the STAR system. And in that STAR system, you are able to look at how the university is dealing with the issue of sustainability in terms of curriculum, in terms of operation and everything. So not only the number of courses which has the sustainability component in them, but the one which is really covers the graduate and postgraduate or undergraduate portfolio for the sustainability in them. And we also look at the learning outcomes that comes out, achieving this objective from these courses or these study programs which are related to sustainability. So it's the core fundamental issue in the university now is to cater for sustainability. But it's not as simple as that. Universities have a lot of challenges. The funding resources are now at risk. There is of course, with inflation everywhere, the expenses are growing, and at the same time, many institutions are bored, and that's why you have increased competition. In the usual, most of the countries, you will find that most of them are the government are taking care of the universities, but not all of them. And you can see here, it's not a new graph, but it shows that some of the countries really take care of all the expenses and others not, because they really depend on the private sector and the ability of the university to generate its own income. So in some of the models, which is, for the highly successful ones, which is like Harvard, Massachusetts, and Yale, and so on, they have a very significant component that can produce fund for the university, especially if they depend on top-notch research or in innovation and innovative products. And they depend mainly on endowment. And in this endowment, they are able to provide consultancy, innovation, and investment. And they are very strong in creating knowledge and creating grants for funding. Some of them also depend on bank loans to be able to produce or transform their facilities to become a self-financing one. And they are usually, their courses are market-driven courses. But let's say that these are the prescription for the usually successful universities. Oh, and I also don't want to talk about these guys only, but I'd like to talk about how in the normal situations they handle it. Then we have, you have to have a mechanism to be able to achieve more funding, what we call matching grant scheme, where you put $1 and $1 is being matched from the university. So this could double your amount of money, which is available in the university to be able to do that. Some of the universities also seek to go to commercial-oriented ventures, where they go and establish a hotel or establish a place where they can have money generated out of this venture, especially if it's related to something that the university is able to do and to create. Other universities seek to go for infrastructure that would help to seek regional and international partnership, so they can capitalize on their diaspora out of the country and to be able to do that. Last but not least is that they start working on, some of the universities have their total funding coming from a private, I don't know why this happens again. My goodness. They seek to go for private farms and as an investment, and in that case, they are able to generate fund, which is very, very crucial to the operation of the university itself. I go quickly to that. Okay. In our case, in universities in Africa, the situation is much more harsh because, most of them there depend on government-sponsored students. And these allocations now are getting reduced more. There's a tough competition, so the number of self-sponsored students are getting less and less. The funding from the agent who supports them are also getting less. They are also suffering from closure due to COVID, suffering from strikes, which happen because people would like to get more income. And if they don't do any streamlining for their financial operation and how to deal with increased expenses and try to cut down on the expenses, they might become insolvent. Well, how can the African universities able to handle that and achieve the financial sustainability? First of all, they need to put a very good and sound financial plan to deliver the strategy of what he wants. It's really dependent on the improvement of the revenue collection, because usually we are a little bit relaxed in that term. So we try to make the revenue collection on time, so you are able to have your investment on time. You try to make budget adjustment because of the COVID-19 happening. So you try to adjust the budget, cut down on any redundancy, try to engage more digitally online, so you are saving on the cost on that. Work most of your operation based on cost recovery. And finally, we try to create mechanisms like the revolving student loan endowment. So all these mechanisms we were able to do for our universities in Africa, and that's how you will see the results in a minute now. I mean, this is one of the things which these did not come from vacuum. A lot of studies happening, they always put on top the business model to be able to achieve sustainability is that you have to have increasing the revenue and reducing the expenses. As well as you need to have a very sound and strong financial planning so you are able to meet the crisis which you are facing. So these are the two pillars of what you want. The second thing is that we need to make a balance and to be working or trying to walk through the corridor of control. So we need to balance between not to go down in the investment, so we don't have underinvestment, or we don't do overinvestment, so we don't affect the capacity of what we are doing and also on our investment in the university. So it has to be balanced. We don't compromise our quality, and at the same time, we don't overinvest in what we are doing. So this delicate balance is important to be able to achieve the target we want. We have 4 universities. Our experience in Africa is that we have 4 universities. Omma University in Kenya, we have Simad University in Somalia, and we have Morogoro University in Tanzania, and Sumait University in Zanzibar. We applied the model as I told you, and as you can see here, even though with the crisis and the problem we are facing, we're still able to attract more students, and even that we were struck in 2020 with the COVID, we're still having a good increase in number of students. Not only that, but we are also able to achieve more of the sustainability by applying these 4 or composite of prescription that you were able to do it with cutting the cost, and trying to capitalize on the revenue and working with a revolving endowment for students and provide them with support and applying the digital online education as well, a mix of both, we were able to achieve sustainability for the 4 universities up to 84%. So this is just, to give you a synopsis of what we have done and how we were able to achieve that. So I would like to thank you very much for allowing me to share with you this experience.
Thank you, Professor Majid. I think it's a very concise and a lot of information given in a short period of time. I appreciate it. If I may sum it up, right? The model for sustainable education would be to increase in revenue and being cost effective. I do like a lot of the points that were being mentioned. For example, the revenue from research or consultancy service offered, and maybe institutions can do investments. And also, I think, if I may sum it correctly, that less established universities can focus on commercially oriented ventures, right? For example, we have universities teaching hospitality industry. Maybe they can set up their own hospitality service. That could be one of the ways. So now we have gone through a lot of the opportunities, achievements, and how universities can be financially sustainable. Let's look at how or what are the threats to sustainable education, which will be elaborated by our second speaker, Mr. Menon. A little bit background about Mr. Menon. He's a law educator with 4 decades of education, very extensive and very specialized in law and policies in education. He has contributed a lot in terms of education in Malaysia. I've gone through his CV and it's very impressive. If I may pick one, which would be he designed and taught higher education capacity building program in Indonesia, Kyrgyzstan, and Tanzania. He was also appointed as consultant on the ministerial committee to review Malaysian laws of higher education with other several ministries committee. And also, he is currently the CEO of Aspect Education. So this organization focuses on providing forum and facilitate a team of experts to think and develop strategies to make higher education widely available. So he is more than I would say capable or have the experience to talk about higher education. So let's allow him to have his spotlight now to talk us through the threats to sustainable education. Over to you, Mr. Menon.
Thank you, Shazli, for the very generous introduction. And also, before I start, Professor Majid, I enjoyed that talk. And, I was delighted to hear that your student numbers kept going up even during the challenging times of COVID. I'm sure that you would have many important lessons to impart to our own very large private education sector. Let me go on to thank NAMA Foundation for this invitation. I've worked with NAMA Foundation now for more than 3 years on various matters, but I'm delighted that they invited me to speak here. This foundation, especially under the leadership of Dr. Saleh, has made significant contribution to advancing education in several countries in Asia and Africa. And they are playing a role which I think is going to be very important when we look at sustainable education. And that is, as neither private or public organization, the foundation is able to intervene in areas where assistance is most required. And I think in this way, NAMA Foundation has been playing a unique and unprecedented role as far as I know in education in Tanzania, in Indonesia, in Kyrgyzstan, and other places. So that's for my introduction, but may I just go on immediately to my presentation. And as I said, Professor Majid did so well in concising his presentation to the given 15 minutes. I tested my presentation. I found that I was going too long. So anyway, I'm going to take the plunge and make a few assertions and then attempt to justify them as I go along. But before I do that, I would like you to look at my first slide, which is a quotation from Stefania Giannini, the Assistant Director General of Education of UNESCO. She says that we are increasingly asking if what people learn is truly relevant to their lives, if what they learn helps to ensure the survival of the planet, education for sustainable development can provide the knowledge, awareness, and action that empower people to transform themselves and transform societies. I think that concisely describes what education should be, and if it has not been that, that is where education should be moving towards. And I was very encouraged with that phrase, and I'll come back to another quotation later. But this particular quotation gives me the framework upon which to talk about sustainable education and the threats that are facing sustainable education. So in doing that, I just want to put this background. In Malaysia, for example, we have a higher education sector that is divided in various ways. All educational institutions at the higher education level are established by law, but the laws are not equal. So as Professor Margaret was talking about funding models vary in this country, but there is also variation or differences in the way they are structured, in the way they are governed, and in the way in which they adopt policies of the government. And we will find that as a result of this divergent rules and policies, higher education faces a long-term threat that it may not be able to conform to what we are discussing today, that is the creation of a sustainable educational system. If we go on to my next slide, I state briefly what it is that I'm planning to do. The concern that I have is this, that whilst education at all levels plays multiple roles in creating a just and sustainable world, education itself is a threatened process in this world that has almost gone mad. Thus, even as we discuss education's pivotal role in achieving sustainability goals, we have to arm ourselves to protect education from the threats that interfere with and pollute its purposes. So just as much as the world is capable of pollution and education is going to teach how to prevent that, education needs to have a considerable amount of self-introspection. And that introspection must include how it will withstand the challenges from the outside. Let me take a pause there, and just for those who may not be familiar with this before, go have a look at the 17 sustainability goals that the United Nations has established. And as I said, I won't repeat them. And if you can't read them all now, I'm sure you can Google them and find out what they're all about. But what is important about these 17 goals is that they probably identify very clearly and probably comprehensively the problems the world is facing. And if education, and indeed if governments and every other organizations begin to look at these 17 goals, I think in the year 2030, which is the year in which these goals are supposed to become a reality, would materialize. But right now, as I said, we have only 8 years. So it is also against the background of this, that if education is going to play a role, then education has to absorb or buy into all of these 17 goals and become a champion for delivering these goals. And that if there are differences between institutions and the way they perceive this, then I think it is also important that institutions speak up and say where these goals have gone wrong. But I don't think institutions can sit back and pretend as if these goals don't exist. Again, Professor Magup's presentation showed how sustainability has been incorporated into African universities, or at least into his university. That kind of a change has not taken place in this country. The only attempt to deal with sustainability goals or sustainability generally is in the primary school and the secondary schools, where they have, various associations and activities introduced to support a study of the sustainability goals as we now describe them. But otherwise, as far as I know, our universities have not as yet paid any special attention to the sustainability goals as a whole, although they may have taken some of those goals on board and have been developing that. But as I said, it is not obvious, and if there are reasons why universities are not doing it, then it is important that they speak about that and convey their differences to the people who actually are responsible for this. The next slide I want to go into is the slide that shows the next slide up to that. Yeah, this one is again the list of it. Yeah. So education is a key enabler of all sustainable development goals. That's something which we agree. Which means there must be transformation in curriculum, there must be transformation in pedagogy, there must be a greater attempt to empower or in fact include the various stakeholders, particularly the students of the university, into determining what education is going to be. And I think only by engaging with the students will universities learn what to teach. This is already happening in a number of universities where student bodies participate in the development of curriculum. As I said, I won't go through the various universities, but mainly in the UK, this is now a process. And that is largely the result of the establishment of the Office of Students in the UK, where focuses based on the students. In many universities and universities in this country, students are treated as if they are outside the university, as if the university is in constant negotiation with them on a contractual basis, and not on the basis as a group who are in an important transition in their lives. They're moving from pre-adulthood into adulthood. And that's a special group, because this is the group that actually needs to be educated about the future. You know, there are many reports, too many to mention here, which say that in the next 10 or 15 years, about 40% of the jobs that we now know will be redundant or no longer in existence. Now, if that is the position, then it is very important that the third bullet point, that we pay more attention to the students and engage the students in a way in which they will be able to participate in the educational process, not as the recipients of education, but also contributing to determining what is education. Now, I compare legislation and in many countries. One of the most impressive legislation is the Indonesian higher education legislation of 2012. It's a document that is worth reading for its own sake, not just for the laws, but just for its own sake. It outlines the basis upon which the university is built. It outlines and indicates what the relationship is between the university, the students, and academia. And it talks about the different responsibilities. That is not something that is seen in our legislation, or indeed in any of the other legislation I've looked at. In some of the African universities' legislation, there are provisions to allow students to participate at the very highest level, at the ministerial level, to determine policies. In Malaysia, on the other hand, students are the victims of rules, of prohibitive rules stopping them from doing a wide range of things. So if there is a legislative provision in Malaysian law on students, it is about telling them you can't do this. And I have great respect for Malaysian students. I have taught myself, as I said, as you heard, I've taught for more than 30 years in higher educational institutions, most of them in this country. And Malaysian students are a rare group of people. I've taught in other countries, comparing them, They have been active, they've been responsible, they are constantly aware, but they are being muted. And that kind of a mutation is one of the challenges that I will talk about. Now, that's, as I said, an educational institution must take on this role that the world's resources are limited, that we need to repair many things that have been damaged, and most importantly, we need to take care of the future. And the future, in the case of universities, is with them. You know, there are universities with 20,000 students, 20,000 students to probably about 5,000 staff or 3,000 staff. 20,000 students who can tell you what the future is or what their future needs are, but we don't do that. My next slide, again, as I said, I'm rushing through some of this, is UNESCO's role, and I'm going to pass that. Other than to say that is one of the important goal is in this educational in the sustainable aspect about education is that it ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. That's a point that I'll come back to when I look at the threats. But I know I'm running to a tight schedule, so I'll go on. And the 5 policies, again, as I said, I think these are these are not new that you can talk about this endlessly. But the point number 3, educator capacity, is something that NAMA has been involved in, and I've been involved in together with some of the projects, is building capacity of educators. I think people have to go down to to teachers level. We are just in the process of creating a society of sustainability in Malaysia to bring in educators and to get them to engage in these discussions. But it is important that the teachers in the university who come from a different background are introduced into this notion of sustainability, and their capacity in teaching in that area is enhanced. So that's the point. And finally, I come to this, and I'm going to, my time is limited, and I go on to the threats facing higher education. Now, when I put this and I discussed this with my colleague who is sitting here helping me promote this, the first response was, should we be talking about threats? Should we not be more conciliatory and look at things that are more pleasant? But I think unless we grapple with these threats, and they're real, and as I said, I have my personal experience as an educator, my personal experience now in running an organization that supports education, see these threats looming, and unless we face them, we're going to lose the plot. We're going to lose the game. Education is going to lose its purpose. So I implore you to stay with me on these few points that I'm going to make, and then I shall close my presentation after that. So if you go into the next point, I want to bring back this notion, the third bullet point. Education in diverse forms and multiple contexts provides the means whereby each generation passes on its culture, discoveries, successes, and failures to the next. Without intergenerational education, very little in a human context can be sustainable. This is very important. I used to tell my students that when you are in the final year, you can call back to the students who just come into the university, wave to them and tell them what the journey has been like. This is important to recount to the people who are coming in. Now, who you're talking to really are the future graduates. You are about to graduate, but there, sitting at the back of the hall, are the new students filling up the empty chairs. They should know your experience. And it is important that that experience is a genuine experience, and that we convey all things forward in truth. It's a difficult word. I seldom use this word. But truth is very important. Integrity is very important. that we are able to maintain with integrity the knowledge that we are teaching, with integrity to ensure that the knowledge that we are imparting is genuine and it is not falsified, and that it is not subject to interferences by any third sources. I'll make this point further again as I go into the next slide. And in the next slide, where I hope to very quickly go through the go to the next slide. Yeah, interference with the generational role, as I said, is going to be the big issue that I think education will be concerned with, and therefore I look at some of the threats that will interfere with this generational aspect of higher education and education generally. Yeah, I now go to the final slide that I had, and the final slide puts in bullet points some of the threats as I perceive it. Now, as I said, people may disagree that these are threats. Others may say that there are other threats, but I'm trying to limit this. I think the first threat that we are facing is this, that education is more and more being seized for political ends. And that is one of the ways in which you can actually stifle education, kill its purpose, make it a stillborn baby because it has got no more purpose in the next generation. And when I say that education is seized for political ends, it's not only in this country, but worldwide we are beginning to see this, that the new liberal movement, which many educationists have spoken about, is really part of that. The whole process of the privatization of education itself is a result of interferences, political interferences. Political interferences not only from within the country, but also through agencies outside the country. And the World Banks, the monetary funds, the various organizations, even UNESCO, I think is sometimes a threat to the way in which education is developing. The second threat is discrimination in access to education, in access to employment. I can't, we've gone through this. Malaysia was under colonial rule for about 200 years. If you study the policies of the colonial government, of the colonial metropolitan power, in the way in which education was provided in what is today Malaysia, you will find the dishonesty in the system. The dishonesty in the system, the discrimination that applied. First of all, it was believed that natives did not require education. Then they said, oh, we will educate them. And then they say, we will educate them only in their own language. And why only in their own language? Because if you taught them in English, they will be exposed to the libertarian views of the West, the views about freedom and democracy, and the views that will challenge colonialism. So education for 200 years was really managed through, in a discriminatory fashion, keeping people away from education rather than bringing them in. Thirdly, we have whitewashing knowledge. This is a practice that is going on. You don't want to provide a history. Again, as I said, we have two types of whitewashing. We whitewash our own history by ourselves. We try and create a view of this country which it is not. And at the same time, we are victims to the bigger whitewash that took place in the last several hundred years. And we still deliver that rubbish as part of our education. We have not learned as universities to break through this colonial mode to find out what really truth is. The fourth point is the preventing free inquiry. Academic freedom, this is something that my team and I are now involved in. Academic freedom does not exist here, and in many other countries it is being squeezed. It is becoming part of the employment terms. A recent High Court decision in Australia virtually looked at academic freedom by interpreting the terms of employment. So where we all believe that academic freedom actually transcended employment and was part and essential characteristic of the university, we're now told, no, If there is academic freedom, look into your contract. If it is there, you have academic freedom. If it is there, you must be subject to all the other controls. If it is not there, that's no academic freedom. And that's the situation that we have. So if you do not provide this kind of freedom of inquiry, intellectual freedom, then really to try and meet the sustainability goals will almost be impossible. Finally, I would say actions in the education arena that divides. And this is really a Malaysian problem. I'm not going to expand on that very much, other than the fact that we are running to the courts very regularly, challenging things like vernacular schools and what is taught in the schools, as if the courts are the place to determine these questions. You know, the evolution of education in this country, especially in the post-colonial period, has been hugely contested. There are balances that you need to take care very carefully. So that is the fifth threat that I fear will affect education and institutions from fulfilling their role in their sustainability tasks. With that, I close my presentation. I thank the organizers again, and I thank Professor Magid for sitting through this presentation. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Menon and Professor Majid as well. I think it's very interesting to know the fact that one of the key enablers in changing the education or making the sustainable in education is to engage the youth, so that because they are the ones who, like you said, they are currently being engaged, but not at the level that might make some impact, for example, in determining policies. And I do agree that at least in Malaysia, sometimes it feels like the students are the victims of, as you mentioned, prohibitive role, and we have a lot of academic background participants now in our sessions. So I'm sure some of them have inputs. So I think let's just. So we do have one question. If I may show it on stage. Right, so from the past regime of SDGs, most African nations couldn't succeed in achieving their goals, especially on health, education, and sustainable environment. Do you think that the current trends for private ownerships of higher education can help? I think let's start with Mr. Menon, and then we go to Mr. Majid, Professor Majid, sorry. Mr. Menon, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as I said, I'm not, familiar with the African situation. So Professor Magid probably would be the best.
Okay, right.
I believe that we need the three varieties there. One, which is the government. The government need to put a lot of effort in supporting higher education in their own country, because accessibility is a very important issue in Africa. And the growth in this has been very slow. So the government need to step up in that. But at the same time, the private universities and, let's say, the non-profit universities are very crucial as well, because they can allow access to not only to excel students, but also to the students who are needy, as you don't have access to, let's say, the government loans, or has no possibility of, they are talented, but they have no access. So providing them with access with good quality education is important, and this is a good role that can be played by the NGO and played by the, let's say, the non-profit universities. So I think strongly that the three varieties need to be in every country, and that's why Direct Aid aims at having one university in every country we are working on, which is 31 countries in Africa.
Great, well put. I think it's a common issues, right? All over the world, that different partners or different institutions has to play a role together: the government, the private sector, the public, and the non-profit sector has to work together in solving issues, not only in education but also in other areas as well. So I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for Q&A. I believe there are more questions that will pop up later, but I do invite everyone to our networking session. It's a separate room where you can roam freely and ask questions, especially to our speaker, because I think this is a very interesting topic and a lot of other people have questions which we don't have time. Then I think that is all from us as the organizer. We really appreciate the time from both of our speakers. It's very insightful to have the views from the very respective people. And with that, I think I thank you all, and I shall end the session now.
Thank
See
you.
you guys in the launch room.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Bye-bye.